Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones we spend a lifetime regretting. He walked away from love, from family, from the chance to be present, and for 4 years, silence became his only companion. But life is a way of bringing us back to what matters, no matter how far we drifted. This is not a story of perfection. It's a story of loss, truth, and what remains when we finally choose presence. White right pointing backhand index. If you want more powerful, real-life stories like this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell, so you never miss the next one that I told myself I was making the only decision I could. The kind of decision that came with a last name, with a company built long before I was born, with obligations that didn't care about what I wanted. At least, that's how I justified it. The truth is, it was easier to surrender than to fight for something uncertain. She didn't cry that night. I almost wish she had. Instead, she just stood there, arms folded, face pale but steady, like someone bracing for a storm she already knew was coming. "You're really leaving?" she asked. I nodded, though my throat felt closed. "It's not what I want. It's what I have to do." Those words tasted like betrayal even as I said them. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. We had spent years building a vision of the life we wanted, late nights sketching out plans on napkins, talking about a small house, maybe children, definitely freedom. Now I was tearing it down with a single decision, and I didn't even have the courage to look her in the eye for long. I told myself she would understand one day, that once she saw the pressure I was under, the deals being forced onto me, the expectations laid out like chains, she would forgive me. But in that moment, her silence said everything. Understanding would not erase abandonment. She turned away first, walked into the bedroom, and shut the door without another word. I stood in the living room, staring at the walls we had painted together, the sofa we had argued over, the framed photo of us at the beach that I couldn't bring myself to take with me. I left before dawn. No goodbye kiss, no promise of return, no reassurance. Just the sound of my footsteps on the stairs and the door closing behind me. On the drive back to the city, I tried to convince myself it was temporary, that once things settled, I could explain and would find our way back. But deep down, I knew I had crossed a line you don't step back from. In the weeks that followed, I drowned myself in work. Meetings blurred into each other. Successes piled up, but each one fell hollow, like clapping in an empty room. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her face, calm, quiet, wounded. People around me said I was thriving. They saw the sharp suits, the late hours, the deal sealed. They didn't see the way my hand hovered over my phone at night, almost dialing her number, then stopping. They didn't hear the silence that lived in my apartment, or the way I avoided certain streets because they reminded me of her. I told no one about the child. She hadn't said it outright, but I knew, the way she held her stomach that night, the look in her eyes, it wasn't just about me leaving. It was about me leaving them. And still, I walked away. Sometimes, when exhaustion stripped me of my defenses, I admitted the truth to myself. I wasn't forced. No one held a gun to my head. I chose the easy betrayal over the difficult fight. I chose to protect a legacy I wasn't even sure I wanted, instead of protecting the person who had believed in me when I had nothing. Months became a year, and I heard nothing from her. No messages, no letters, no chance encounters. Friends who once saw us together stopped mentioning her name. It was as if the life we had built was erased, brick by brick, until I was the only one carrying its memory. And so I built a mask. I smiled when I was supposed to, gave speeches that sounded confident, signed contracts with a steady hand. But every now and then, in the quiet moments, I felt it, the fracture running through me, the cost of that departure. People think betrayal is loud, a dramatic rupture, a fight that ends with shouting and slammed doors. But mine was quiet. It was a hand unclasped too soon, a promise left unfinished, a life abandoned in silence. And silence is a way of echoing far longer than words. Looking back now, I realize I wasn't just walking away from her. I was walking away from myself, the part of me that wanted something real, something fragile, something that didn't come with board meetings or shareholders. I thought I could bury that part under titles and wealth. But no matter how much I built, the foundation was cracked. 4 years passed before I understood just how deep the fracture went. 4 years before the decision I made that night returned to face me, no longer as a memory, But as a living consequence, I could not escape. And when it did, it would no longer be about me and her. It would be about the life that had been shaped in my absence, the children who carried my reflection without ever knowing my name. But on that night, all I carried was silence and the sound of a door closing behind me. Success can be a kind of disguise. It looks impressive from the outside, polished and untouchable, but on the inside it often hides what you don't want others to see. For me, it hid regret. In the months after I walked away, my life accelerated. The company demanded everything. I was 30 years old and already being handed responsibilities that had crushed men twice my age. People called me ambitious, disciplined, relentless. They admired the way I absorbed pressure and delivered results. What they didn't know was that I needed the work to numb the silence I carried. I spent more time in glass towers than on the streets I once knew. Meetings began at dawn and stretched late into the night. My calendar was filled with deals, lunches, conferences, signatures. The city passed by me like a blur behind tinted car windows. I lived high above it all, in an apartment that overlooked the skyline, with floor-to-ceiling windows that showed me everything yet kept me detached from it. From the outside, I looked like a man who had won. I had the clothes, the cars, the kind of money that insulated me from ordinary problems. But inside, there was a stillness I couldn't escape. Even surrounded by people, I often felt alone. I'd sit in boardrooms filled with voices debating millions of dollars, and all I could think about was how none of it mattered the way a quiet evening once had. Her voice in the kitchen, the promise of something simple, something honest. At first, I thought the silence would fade, that if I kept moving fast enough, if I kept succeeding, I could outrun it. But silence doesn't disappear. It grows. It echoed in the corners of my apartment at night, in the pause between conversations, in the brief seconds after applause. There were women, of course. Introductions made at charity galas, dinners set up by colleagues. They admired the position, the lifestyle. But every time I looked across the table, I found myself comparing them to her, the way she laughed without restraint, the way she believed in dreams larger than money. None of them came close, because none of them saw me for who I was. They only saw the mask. Occasionally, someone would ask about my past. I learned to answer vaguely, to shift the conversation, to pretend that chapter was closed. But in private, it never was. I kept one photo hidden in a drawer, not on display, not in sight, but close enough that I could pull it out when the loneliness became too much. A reminder of what I had lost, or perhaps what I had chosen to lose. The company rewarded me. Promotions, recognition, the kind of trust usually reserved for older men. My father began to step back. The board spoke my name with approval, and I was placed in rooms where decisions shaped industries. But with every step upward, I felt further removed from myself. Success was supposed to feel like fulfillment. Instead, it felt like armor, heavy, suffocating, necessary only because I had no other defense. Sometimes, in rare moments of honesty, I admitted to myself what I had done. I had abandoned her, abandoned them. I told myself it was duty, legacy, responsibility. But beneath all those justifications, the truth was simpler. I had been afraid. Afraid of losing power, afraid of disappointing the family name, afraid of choosing love over security. And that fear shaped every part of the man I had become. There was one night I remember clearly. It was after closing the biggest deal of my career, a merger that secured my place at the top. The celebration was extravagant. Champagne, speeches, applause. Yet when I returned home, the apartment was silent. I sat on the edge of the bed, still in my suit, and whispered to myself, "This is it? This is what you left for." The sound of my own voice in that empty room chilled me. I tried to bury that memory the next morning, but it never left. It lingered, reminding me that I had traded intimacy for applause, connection for recognition, and the applause always faded. Years blurred together. Seasons passed without meaning. My calendar dictated my life, not my heart. And though I convinced everyone else that I was thriving, deep down I knew I was simply surviving. Living in glass towers doesn't make you untouchable. It makes you transparent. People saw the image, but they never saw the cracks. And then, after 4 years of building walls higher and higher, one chance encounter shattered everything. In a place of constant movement, where strangers brushed past without notice, I saw her again. Not alone this time. She had 2 small children with her, twins, their hands holding onto Hayes, their faces lit with a joy that stopped me cold. In that instant, the glass towers around me broke. Every deal, every late night, every sacrifice, it all fell silent compared to the truth standing a few feet away. I didn't need to ask who they were. Their faces carried my reflection in ways I couldn't deny. And for the first time in years, I couldn't move forward. I stood there, surrounded by travelers rushing past, and realized that the past I thought I had buried was alive, breathing, and looking back at me through the eyes of 2 children who didn't even know my name. Airports of a rhythm, voices echoing, wheels rolling across tile floors, screens flashing destinations. For most people, it's just movement. For me, that day, it became a place where time stopped. I had been in transit for years, really. City to city, deal to deal. Airports were routine. But as I stood waiting for my flight, I caught sight of her. She looked different, more composed, more grounded, but unmistakably her. The woman I had left behind. She was not alone. 2 small children, no older than 4, clung to her hands as they walked together. Their laughter rose above the noise around them, soft but sharp enough to cut through everything else. I froze. The crowd kept moving, but I couldn't. It felt like the air was pressed out of my lungs. The children's faces. I knew them. Or rather, I knew myself in them. The curve of the jaw, the eyes, the slight tilt of a smile. It was like staring into mirrors I had never been prepared to see. She didn't notice me at first. She was busy adjusting their jackets, guiding them through the crowd. But I couldn't look away. Every second I watched, the silence of the last 4 years roared louder. My first instinct was to move forward, to say something, anything, to break the distance. But my feet stayed planted, heavy with guilt. What right did I have? What could I possibly say? That I had walked away when they needed me most? That I had traded them for boardrooms and contracts? Finally, her eyes lifted, scanning the crowd. They met mine. For a second, neither of us moved. It was just a glance, but in it lived every unspoken word from that night I left. Her expression didn't change much. No shock, no anger, just a stillness. A kind of calm that wasn't forgiveness, but wasn't hatred either. It was distance. And in some ways, that was harder to bear. She looked away first, focusing on the children, pulling them closer as if the world around them didn't matter. And maybe, for her, it didn't. Maybe she had built a life where I no longer existed. I stood there, watching them disappear into the crowd. My chest ached with something I hadn't felt in years. Not just regret, but longing. A longing not for the life I had, but for the one I had abandoned. I thought about approaching them, but fear stopped me. Fear of her words, fear of her silence, fear of the truth those children carried. I wasn't ready to face it, and yet I couldn't escape it either. Instead, I followed at a distance, not close enough to intrude, but close enough to witness. They stopped at a small cafe near the gate. She bent down to the children's level, speaking to them softly, tying a loose shoelace, brushing a curl out of her daughter's face. It was ordinary, but to me, it was extraordinary. It was everything I had missed. The boy looked up at her with the kind of trust only children can give, and I felt it hit me. Trust one had never earned, love I had never been there to receive. A memory flashed in my mind. Her standing in our old kitchen, laughing as she held a mug of coffee, telling me she wanted children one day. I had laughed with her, promised her we'd make it happen. And now, here it was, without me. I turned away before they could notice me again. My hand shook as I reached for my phone, not even knowing who I wanted to call. There was no one who could understand what I had just seen, no one who could erase a hollow in my chest. For the rest of that day, I was useless. Meetings blurred, conversations slipped past me. All I could see were their faces, all I could hear was their laughter. That night, back in my apartment, I sat in the dark and whispered into the silence, "They are mine." Saying it out loud felt both terrifying and undeniable. But along with the truth came a question I couldn't answer. What now? I couldn't erase the years I had missed. I couldn't undo the night I walked away. I couldn't simply appear and expect to be welcomed. I thought about her glance, the way she had looked through me as though I were a stranger. Maybe that's what I was now. A stranger to her, and a stranger to them. Still, the image of those children stayed with me. Their faces carried more than resemblance. They carried a chance. A chance I had lost, a chance I might never deserve, but one I could no longer ignore. The airport was supposed to be another stop in my life of movement, but it became a mirror. It showed me not just who I was, but who I wasn't. Not just what I had, but what I had lost. And as I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, one truth settled deeper than the rest. Silence had kept me safe for 4 years. But now, silence was no longer an option. The days after the airport felt like walking through fog. On the surface, life continued. Meetings, deadlines, dinners with investors. But underneath, everything had shifted. The silence that once felt like protection now felt like punishment. I kept seeing their faces. Not in dreams, but in daylight, in the middle of boardroom discussions, in the pause before a presentation. The twins were everywhere, in every reflection, in every moment of stillness. It was as though the life I had built was no longer enough to hold back the truth. I told myself I should reach out, that I should call her, write her, find a way to explain. But each time I thought about it, fear caught me. What could I possibly say that wouldn't sound hollow? I'm sorry? I didn't know? Words like that couldn't fill 4 years of absence. Instead, I carried the silence with me. It grew heavier by the day. One evening, after another long meeting, I sat in my office staring at the city lights. From up there, everything looked controlled, ordered. But inside me, it was chaos. I picked up my phone, scrolled to her number, still saved, though unused, and stared at it until the screen went dark. I remembered the night I left, the way she stood still, arms folded, eyes steady. I had convinced myself she would eventually understand, that she would see I had no choice. But now, looking back, I realized that silence is also a choice. And I had chosen it over her, over them. The weight of that choice settled on me like a stone I couldn't set down. At work, people noticed my distraction. "You all right?" A colleague asked one afternoon after I missed a simple detail in a report. "I'm fine," I said quickly. Too quickly. He nodded, but I could tell he didn't believe me. The truth was, I was unraveling. The armor I had built, the image of the flawless executive, was cracking. And beneath it, I found not strength, but regret. I tried to bury myself in more work, but even that no longer helped. Success couldn't quiet the memory of her glance at the airport, the way she had looked at me without anger, without recognition, almost as if I no longer existed. That was worse than hatred. Hatred would have meant I still mattered. Indifference meant I didn't. At night, I lay awake wondering about their lives. Did they know who I was? Did she tell them my name? Or was I just a shadow, an empty space? Did they ask about their father? Did she answer? I began to notice the emptiness in my own routines. I had everything, money, power, respect, but no one to share it with. No voice waiting at home, no footsteps running through the hall. The silence was relentless. One evening, after leaving the office, I walked through a park instead of heading straight home. Families were scattered across the grass, children playing, parents watching, laughter spilling into the air. I stood there longer than I should have, a stranger among strangers, watching what I had thrown away. I whispered to myself, "This is what you gave up." Saying it aloud cut deeper than I expected. The days blurred together. Yet the image of them, her, the twins, never faded. If anything, it grew sharper. Every day of silence was another day of distance, another day I could never get back. Finally, I admitted what I had avoided for years. I had betrayed more than her. I had betrayed myself. By staying silent, by choosing the easier path, I had become a man I didn't recognize. A man who could fill a room with confidence but couldn't say the words that mattered. I thought about calling again, thought about showing up, but the same question haunted me. What right did I have? Could I walk back into her life and claim something I had abandoned? Could I look into the eyes of children who didn't know me and say, "I'm your father"? The silence between us had once been a shield. Now it was a wall built higher each day I failed to speak. One night, after another failed attempt to dial her number, I sat in the dark and admitted the truth out loud. I was a coward. The words hung in the air, raw and unpolished. They were the closest thing to honesty I had allowed myself in years. The weight of silence was crushing me, and yet I knew I couldn't carry it much longer. Something had to change, but change wasn't simple. Change meant risking rejection, risking humiliation, risking the possibility that it was already too late. Still, as the days dragged on, one thought grew louder than the rest. If I didn't try, the silence would bury me. The breaking point came quietly, not in a crisis, not in a collapse, but in the stillness of another night alone. I had just returned from a dinner with partners, the kind of evening where everyone laughs too loudly, praises each other's achievements, and hides their exhaustion behind expensive wine. I stepped into my apartment, closed the door, and the silence hit me. It was louder than the noise I had left behind. I loosened my tie, dropped my phone on the table, and sat on the edge of the couch. The city buzzed outside my window, but inside there was nothing. That emptiness had become unbearable. I realized then that I had been waiting for time to soften the edges, for regret to fade, for life to move me forward without effort. But time had not healed anything. If anything, it had deepened the wound. I whispered into the quiet, "You're wasting your life." It wasn't dramatic. It was matter-of-fact, like stating the weather. But those words felt final. I couldn't go back to pretending. The next morning, I walked into the office, looked around at the glass walls, the polished floors, the endless rows of faces, and I felt nothing. For years, this had been my temple, my justification for every choice. Now it felt hollow, a shell of ambition. I asked myself what presence really meant. Was it closing another deal, securing another investment, or was it being there, truly there, for the moments that couldn't be bought or repeated? That question stayed with me. It followed me into meetings, haunted me during presentations, lingered in the back of my mind when people congratulated me on success I no longer believed in. I tried to imagine what it would look like to return, to see her again, to see them. I didn't picture reconciliation, or forgiveness, or even acceptance. I pictured simply standing there, present, no excuses, no armor, just a man facing the consequences of his choices. For the first time in years, I didn't think about what I might lose. I thought about what I had already lost, and how much longer I was willing to let silence define me. I spoke with no one about it. Not colleagues, not friends. This wasn't a decision to be shared or advised on. It was something I had to claim myself. One evening, I walked into my office, closed the door, and sat across from my assistant. She looked at me, waiting for instructions. Instead, I said quietly, "I'm stepping back." Her eyes widened. From what? From all of it. The board, the travel, the constant noise. "I need time." She stared at me, searching for an explanation I didn't give. I didn't owe the world one. For once, the explanation belonged to me. I expected fear, but instead I felt a strange calm. The kind that comes when you finally stop running from yourself. The days that followed were restless but lighter. For the first time in years, my schedule was open. I didn't rush from meeting to meeting. I didn't bury myself in numbers. I simply sat with the silence, but this time, I didn't avoid it. I listened. In the quiet, I began to see more clearly. I thought about her, the life she had built without me. I thought about the twins, growing into their own beings, never once hearing my voice at bedtime, never once reaching for my hand when they stumbled. The thought cut deep, but it also gave me direction. Presence, I realized, isn't about grand gestures. It isn't about rewriting the past. It's about showing up fully in the present moment, even if it's late, even if it's imperfect. One night, after weeks of circling the decision, I sat down with a pen and paper. I didn't type. I didn't send a message. I wrote. Slowly, carefully, I let the words come. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve a place in the life you built. But I can't keep pretending the silence is enough. I want to see you. Not to explain, not to ask for anything, but to stand in front of you and be honest for the first time. If you allow it, I'll come. If you don't, I'll stay silent. The choice is yours." I signed my name at the bottom, folded the letter, and sealed it. Holding that envelope, I felt the weight of years, the weight of choices, mistakes, absence. The next morning, I mailed it. I didn't know what her answer would be. I didn't know if she would respond at all. But for the first time since I walked away, I had chosen presence. Not perfection, not control, just the courage to show up. And that alone felt like the beginning of something different. The letter was gone from my hands, carried into the machinery of mail and distance. All I could do was wait. 4 days. I checked the box, the inbox, every channel where an answer might arrive. Nothing came. And then, one evening, I opened my door and found a single envelope on the floor. Her handwriting. I held it carefully, as though opening it too quickly might break the fragile bridge it represented. Inside, there were only a few lines. You left. You missed years you can't have back. But if you're ready to stand in truth, not as who you were, but as who you are now, you can see us. No promises beyond that. I read it again and again. The words weren't forgiveness, not even acceptance. They were a door, narrow, uncertain, but real. That weekend, I drove out of the city. The highway stretched into quieter roads, the skyline shrinking behind me. My chest tightened with every mile, fear pressing harder the closer I came. When I arrived, I didn't step out right away. I sat in the car, staring at the modest house. Children's toys scattered in the yard, curtains moving lightly in the breeze. A life that had grown in my absence. Finally, I forced myself to knock. She opened the door slowly. Time had changed her face, but not her eyes. They held a calm steadiness I remembered, one that had once anchored me. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't the same as before. This silence felt like a choice, a space we both needed to measure what remained between us. You came, she said finally. I did. My voice cracked. She stepped aside, and I entered. The house smelled faintly of coffee, of lived-in warmth. I followed her to the living room, where 2 small figures sat cross-legged on the floor, crayons spread across paper. The twins. They looked up, curious but not afraid. Their faces held traces of her, traces of me, but mostly something wholly their own. I tried to speak, but my throat closed. She filled the gap. This is your father. The word landed like a blow. Not for them, for me. Father, a role I had abandoned, a truth I had ignored, a title I no longer felt worthy to claim. The twins exchanged a glance, then looked back at me. One asked softly, "Where were you?" I swallowed hard. Far away, too far. But I'm here now, if you'll let me. They studied me in silence, the kind only children can hold, clear, piercing, unburdened by politeness. Then one of them picked up a crayon and handed it to me. No words, just a gesture. I took it with trembling hands and sat on the floor beside them. For the first time, I wasn't negotiating a deal, giving a speech, or defending my image. I was simply present, coloring a crooked house on paper with the 2 lives I had once chosen to leave behind. Hours passed. No grand reconciliation, no dramatic declarations, just the quiet act of being there. When they drifted off to sleep, I rose to leave. She walked me to the door. Neither of us pretended that years of absence could be undone in a day. I don't know what this will look like, she said softly. I can't promise anything. I'm not asking for promises, I replied. Just a chance to be here, whatever that means. She nodded, and in her eyes I saw not forgiveness, but something close, permission to try. Driving back that night, I didn't feel redeemed. I didn't feel whole. What I felt was quieter, smaller, but real. The weight of silence had finally lifted, replaced by the fragile possibility of presence. What remains, I realize, is never the life we imagined. It's the life that's left after choices, after mistakes, after time. And sometimes, if we're willing to stand in it fully, what remains can still be enough. If you enjoyed this story, hit like, follow, and share your opinion in the comments.